Hey, what's going on, guys? My name is John Park and welcome to another tutorial series. In this video I'm going to show you guys kind of my design process and also digital process in trying to paint and lay out this particular image. So let's get started. Alright, so when we actually get into the painting process, a couple of things I like to keep in mind is the overall concept. And the concept just has to be something relatively simple. I know a lot of times when we get actually into the start of the painting, we typically don't know what to start off with. So I actually have kind of gathered a couple of things, like some of my references here. But that's like one of the things that I always try to think about is just kind of like, you know, gather up some reference, get a general idea of like color, texture, mood, and even architecture, if that helps, you know. Because a lot of these things, we're actually going to have a lot of questions throughout our actual painting process. So I just want to think about general mood, color, and architecture. As we go into the start of the painting, then I'll start thinking about composition and placement of details and stuff like that. However, the very thing I'm most focused on is going to be on the initial elements that I place in, just to kind of get things going. So I have kind of this really cool texture here. I love the netting on this. It's actually really nice. I think there's some cool shapes here, and also just like some of the shapes here are really great for what we can use and how we can actually integrate that into our overall design. And we got some more elements here. And just thinking about like some of the forms and stuff that we can actually implement into our scene. And some images will be actually really good for like texture, just like this here. This is actually a nice texture bit that I can use. And also something like this is great too, you know, kind of the back wall of some of this stuff here. It gives us a lot of scale, especially a lot of the scaffolding and platforms that are on there. So that stuff I really think it might be beneficial for us. The next thing is, you know, have a set of monkeys or apes. So these are pre-cut assets that I made, and I'm actually going to use our original design that we did for a previous tutorial as a point of reference, and also looking at the overall design to see, you know, what kind of world does this guy live in. You know, it's kind of like these guys don't just live in the trees. They're probably very sophisticated, you know, monkeys, you know, that have a very developed mindset and also a culture and kind of like a backstory, and you know, like they have a certain society. So here are some other, like, you know, buildings or architecture that maybe these guys live in, kind of made up of a bunch of random pieces, you know. Granted, they're not like engineers like humans, but maybe we can have a little bit of fun with, you know, a little influence of Japanese architecture mixed in with kind of the cobbled bits. Alright, so let's just organize our files. So we have basically reference for architecture, we have reference for our apes, and we have reference for mood and color. So I like to typically start off kind of drawing out just the general gesture and flow of our scene, and I'm thinking like some sort of nice S-curve to kind of draw our eye into the focal point. And the focal point is going to be, you know, obviously it's going to be our character, but a lot of it's going to lead somewhere to some sort of structure. So thinking about kind of the S-curve, or where this line leads, is always going to be kind of the destination, right? Because our eye, when we look at images, we always like to look at how would we actually traverse there. And so those are some of the things that I like to, you know, quickly indicate, even at this early of a phase. I'm just thinking about like maybe we can put in some bridge-like structures here, you know. And at this phase, it's like, you know, don't worry about the pretty drawing, only worry about the awesome ideas, you know. So like chicken scratch drawings, be rough with it, do 100 of these, you know, if you have to, like 100 1-minute ones. Just try to like crank out a bunch of quick ideas. I was thinking about like composition here and seeing how this might flow. into our overall image. You know, and a lot of times, like as I'm drawing out these elements, I'm actually unsure of, you know, the architecture itself. Is just kind of, you know, shapes. That's all it really is at the sketch phase. Everything is just a shape, right? And I purposely actually wanted our character to actually be a little bit larger in frame, only to really give off kind of the more intimate read of, like, you know, this character is definitely, you know, going to this building or this thing for the first time. So I definitely wanted the character to be relatively more involved in terms of scaling. And obviously, since we're doing like an ape-like character, you know, a lot of the gesture and poses is going to be reflecting an ape. So I'm just kind of sketching in the general idea and how I can draw on the character without completely covering everything up. I'm thinking about, like, you know, drawing or adding in this spear here of some sort. And I think yeah, just even changing the pose a bit. Like you can see, you know, the first one wasn't quite working out. You know, and this is where, you know, I also fall into the trap of, like, you know, I get really nervous, you know, because we don't know how our drawing is going to turn out. But it's all good because, you know, it's at this phase we're allowed to make mistakes, right? So here's something that I want to talk about here is kind of the overall, the difference between architecture, natural environment, and our characters here. So the thing about identifying these things is that we know how and what we're actually planning to do. So we have kind of our overall structure here, and, you know, the red is indicating kind of how we're flowing into this environment. But I'm just going to quickly sketch out the overall structure and architecture for this thing. And kind of draw out, you know, how this thing actually looks as it's bending the corner. And even at this phase, I'm really loose, you know, like design wise, it's not going anything more beyond than just normal shapes, because that's actually all I'm really focused on, is just the shape of it. And also maybe even like the upper structure here might have some sort of cool, like, you know, bits kind of turning, kind of reinforcing that perspective and also that gesture, right, as it's receding into the distance. So I'm going to put this up at top, and I'm going to use, this has just, the sketch has notes, and I'm actually going to use this photo here, because I thought it was actually quite nice. There's something really nice about the textures and also the information here. So I'm going to go ahead and put this at the very top, and I'm going to stretch it out, actually, because, you know, a photo, I don't want to be a slave to the photo, so I'm going to do whatever I can in order to get my image to read. So if I have to, I'm gonna stretch it, I'm gonna squash it, I'm gonna, you know, take elements out of it, and also just do whatever I can to really alter the photo for my need. And here I'm just looking for another element, maybe something for the background, or even kind of some of the natural ledges. And I think this might be a really cool piece here. I'm going to stretch it out a little bit and kind of give it a nice overhang to start off. This is kind of nice. And also, you know, at this phase, it's just kind of like, okay, let's just get in our overall colors and textures. So I went into match color, and match color mode can actually be found under our edit, image, and mode. And you can actually go into this option here to really kind of toggle and play with the colors and hues of our actual photograph. You know, instead of having it be kind of this like nuclear green from the original image here, I'm actually going to alter it. But since it wasn't quite working out for me with match color, I just went ahead and I decided to do you know, color balance. This is a lot easier, a lot more manual. But match color is great because it's very calculated, and it's also kind of uses just you know, image recognition and also color information from your source to try to match the color and value. So what I'm doing here is I'm thinking about this background, and I really want this background to feel kind of continuous of this like waterfall. So I'm thinking it might be cool if we grab a little section of this here, and we're gonna stretch it, turn it the other way, and there you go, we have our background. And I kind of wanted the background to be relatively large in space and let it be kind of this epic waterfall scene. Kind of like, you know, these guys probably built a civilization around water, but more importantly, this is kind of how, you know, they live. Like, they're high up in the mountains, and you know, they're very samurai. You know, they're kind of like this really refined, you know, monkey tribe that basically made a settlement out here, and built this structure that's kind of up along the lines of like these waterfalls. Just gonna go ahead and edit some of this stuff down using our mask here. And here I'm just kind of cutting away at some of our images, and you can see, you know, I'm actually trying to get it to get closer to our sketch here. But right now it's just all about getting the colors and elements in, and I'm gonna even reuse part of this photo again just to get a little bit of that piece in, right, to have that bit stick out, so we can actually place our architecture on top. Okay, stretch some of the colors out, erase some of the ledges here, and then we're gonna squash it just a little bit to get a little bit more in line with the scaling here. I'm gonna use my texture brush to kind of pull some of this stuff out. I'm going to desaturate the colors a bit here, and I'm using color balance to match the temperature. Now, when you guys are painting and you feel that your image or your particular element of what you're painting doesn't quite have the same temperature, meaning if it's too warm or if it's too cold, then you can actually go into color balance to adjust some of those things. There's so many different ways to do it in Photoshop. I know a lot of guys who are very proficient in using curves. And curves is another way to actually alter and adjust color and temperature and also value. But for me, curves is a little it's kind of like an all-in-one kind of tool, so you really have to kind of play with it, and it's multi-dimensional just the way you can use it. I typically like kind of the hue and saturation, and also just the simple color balance, just to keep it easier for me to understand and control. But I know guys that are very proficient using curves. Alright, so here I'm actually using what is called a mixer brush. Now, a mixer brush is great for sampling colors in our image to kind of get a little bit of diversity, and also it's just another way of kind of sampling and cloning some of the colors onto our brush. And this is really, really nice when we're trying to get a nice variety of color to get integrated onto our painting. So you notice I'm just kind of going on the side here, like erasing everything. I had a bunch of presets here that were just kind of strange, so I'm just going to delete. And I'm just going to start making my own presets. I'm going to title this Cool One. And that way, you know, I can always refer back to this brush. I really like kind of the way it kind of steps. It has all these really nice textures and just the way it's pulling some of the colors. And it's great. It's a great technique brush. And it's a great way to kind of generate, you know, colors and, you know, mix certain things around. All right, so let's go to color mode here, and I'm just gonna kind of get this more in the realm of this neutral kind of greenish kind of environment, because it was reading a little blue from the previous photo. And even here, I like the I kind of like this warm palette, so I'm gonna bring this down using our mixer brush, and maybe even pull it back into the background here. But I love using the mixer brush because instead of using a smudge tool or color picking around that area, there's a lot of happy accidents that you get. Just the way the colors kind of blend, and the way they kind of bleed into each other. It's really, you get a really nice effect. So referring back to my sketch here, I'm just gonna make sure that it follows or contours kind of our general shape. And also, you know, here it's just kind of like, let's maybe turn this a little bit, and you can kind of see just the way the mixer brush is working here. Kind of has this nice oil based look. Really, really nice. It's funny because I'm not even good of an oil painter, and even to me, I'm like thinking, damn, this is kind of a cool oil painting feel. It's a bit strange. Someone once asked me, like, do you oil paint? And I was like, I've never touched oils in my life. I probably should. I probably should actually, you know, try doing more traditional media. The only thing that I'm very proficient in traditional media is probably pen and markers. That's kind of what I grew up, you know, doing most of my art education. But yeah, this nice mixer brush kind of gives me this nice like oily kind of like look, you know, like as if I painted all this stuff. We're gonna smudge the colors around here just a little bit to kind of kill the detail but also still retain the colors. I'm gonna go back to my regular brush mode, and you'll see me kind of toggling back and forth, kind of using different brushes to really get a lot of variety. And there's something that you know, one of my favorite artists once said is, you know, you have to constantly, you know, keep switching your brushes around. Why? Not only do you get a different look or a different result, but you actually get, it forces you to think about things every single moment of your painting. So without having to feel like you're constantly, you know, just pushing paint, you actually have to really, you know, think about every single stroke, every single mark that you're making to justify why you're using that brush. So a lot of times, you know, we'll stick with one brush, and a lot of times, you know, most people like myself, we actually never change the brush nor the brush size. So what happens is that we're just kind of mindlessly just painting. So here's something that I'm doing that's really fun. Is I'm actually getting that photo, and I double clicked to get rid of the background to get some of the elements here. And so this is something that I use, and it's called blend options. And it's a really great way of extracting just some of the darker values or lighter values of your photo image. And on an architectural and design level, like, I thought this would be a nice opportunity for me to put in some of these forms. So here I'm gonna grab just this bottom slat here, copy paste, and I'm going to shrink it down. Okay, and this time I'm probably going to use the magic wand tool, and select some of my colors here and go to select and similar, and it selects everything. And you notice how it actually selected everything out, all of the color in that range. So I'm going to go ahead and use this to kind of match into our image. And this is where it's all about the textures, the colors, you know, just to kind of get it closer to our sketch. And I thought this was a really, really nice image here. I love the complexity and layering of this particular photograph, mainly for its architecture and kind of the kind of jumbled look. You know, it looks really abandoned, kind of warehousey. It looked like an old like mining, you know, train mining, you know, structure or something like that. But I love the colors and the randomness of different materials here. You got a lot of worn out wood, rusted metals, you know, kind of broken bits of you know, structures laying around. So I thought this would be really neat to have just for our structure here. So I'm going to add it here. Make a selection of this, bring it down, because I kind of want this texture to repeat. I'm going to put this on top and shrink it down just to kind of match our overall sketch here. And if you look here, like just looking at our sketch, you know, there's a lot of nice kind of things that we can imply to get some of those elements in. So I'm going to use this particular photograph here. And I always do this. I always pull out things that I think that I'm going to use, and I just have it on the side. And it's completely okay to do that, especially because, you know, it's just, you know, these are just pieces or bits of reference that we can always refer back to. And I'm just going to go ahead and actually erase out what I don't necessarily need, or what my shape is going to be. Toggling back and forth from our reference image. I'll have this background saved out for you guys, so you guys can check out kind of my general process here. And I'm gonna go ahead and just kind of glaze this background just a little bit, glazing by like pushing it back just a little bit. And I have this on overlay, but I kind of want this nice intensity of light. And you know, at this phase there's a lot of trial and error, and I'm just kind of, you know, playing with colors and mood to kind of get this overall feel. And maybe we're just gonna give it a little bit more of a darker crunch here, and even putting on a multiply, seeing how that looks. And I'm thinking it might be cool if we actually have a bit of light coming through like that. You know, like we kind of see a little bit of the sunlight seeping through, but this is relatively in a more hidden village, you know. And we see a little pocket of light here in the foreground. And this gives us justification for, you know, where we can play with our values and lighting. So if the background is lit, the question is, will this building be lit? And the answer would most likely be no. So I'm going to go ahead and put this on soft light, and I'm going to color it down. I might even use a little bit of multiply to darken down this this structure here. Use a little bit of darken, select some of the nice blues. And then from here, now I'm going to just go ahead and paint the extension of this thing down, color picking. At this phase, a lot of times I actually think about, you know, just the overall architecture, but also kind of the lighting, because the lighting is something that, you know, you kind of want to establish, you know, relatively early on if you're still working on your design. I know in other tutorials or examples, you know, you can actually do the lighting at the very end. But in this particular kind of instance, I actually wanted to establish the lighting early on to get a little bit more feel for kind of what my environment's going to be like, you know, and just kind of see how it's going to influence my overall the overall structure and the overall readability. You know, that's the most important thing, is the readability, right? So I'm just going here, laying in some of the more structure, some of the extended structures in the background, because I still want that S curve. I still want this thing to kind of bend around the corner. And I have this little scaffolding, chaotic scaffolding like structure here, and I'm gonna stretch it, pull it around, and see what we can do with this. That's kind of cool. And I'm actually gonna use match color this time. And notice this right here, how it calculated and used the colors within my layer, or within some of the image layers that I have in my file, and I was able to instantly match the colors. Now it's going to be confusing the first time that you use it for anyone that's trying this out. If you don't know how it works exactly, be sure to just you know, feel free to email me or ask me. I might even just do another quick tutorial on how this actually works. It's a great way to just kind of get some of these colors to kind of quickly you know, get in the same range, or same family range. I'm gonna lighten this up here. I'm gonna continue to use the same piece just to see, because it's giving us such nice textures, and kind of like the scaffolding and the stepping of this, you know. I'm gonna slightly desaturate this down a little bit, or even maybe bring some of this color down. Maybe soft light it. Still testing out, you know. I think for me at this stage, it was kind of like, okay, what do I do with this ledge? Because this ledge was, I felt like it didn't have the nice flow from our sketch. So I'm going to sketch in, just double check and make sure I get that curve. And maybe I can just kind of pull this back a little bit. So I open that up, and then that way it can give me the real estate. So let's just go ahead and duplicate it, just because I don't want to lose this shape. This is a nice shape. But I'm going to just stretch it back so I can open that up and just kind of draw in that curve that I'm looking for. And I'm using just a texture brush here. It has a lot of nice tooth to the actual image. And I'm going to just draw it in. And notice it's kind of blending in with the waterfall, which it doesn't necessarily bug me, you know, because it can probably maybe be a waterfall. But I definitely kind of want that gesture and that readability of this kind of line going through. I don't know if it's too direct. Again, these are things at this phase, you know, we have to kind of test out and see how it works with our composition. So I'm just gonna go ahead and undo this. Maybe just continuing this waterfall here. You know, a lot of this stuff, what's great about it is, again, I'm still trying to treat this like a sketch. Even at this paint form, a lot of it's still gonna be a sketch. You know, I don't even know, you know, even though we did a loose sketch here, you know, I know that we got a lot of the general things outlined in terms of like basic composition, but now this is like, we're dealing with color here. So I really want to see how we can kind of get this background to work. So this is like a really cool piece that we got early on, and I'm going to go ahead and use match color. and you can see instantly how it kind of gets us in that vein of that nice color grouping. And what's great about this is that now I can actually use the color that it's set for me and start kind of playing with this placement for that background. Because that was the thing that was kind of bugging me, was like, okay, I don't want it to be this like natural structure just back there. Maybe just something a little bit more reasonable, that maybe there's something else back there. some sort of other, you know, architectural element that kind of bends around. Excuse me. And also just using the masks here to kind of carve in and out of what I want to reveal or what I want to keep in. I definitely want that nice ledge here. I'm going to erase out any of the this little sky that was from the photograph. Use select similar and just delete. Okay, so this was a really cool architectural piece. I was like, man, it'd be awesome if they had like this, you know, the building that's out in the front can be like a temple or a post or something, but the thing in the back can actually be kind of the main temple or the main building, you know. And it kind of had like this nice, like, you know, Asian pagoda looking structures. I kind of liked how the it kind of gave an indication of these little tiers, which was really neat. Let's see here. I'm gonna pull in just another bit of reference here. Let's just look at our original reference. Go back to our little bag of cool stuff. I'm gonna pull a little bit of this here and maybe use it for a bottom. That's kind of cool. Something like that, just to give it a little bit of that repetition and texture. And you'll see that I'll oftentimes like kind of toggle back and forth. Even though I'm not completely sold on how that image is going to work, you know, I'm going to constantly just reevaluate my image to see, you know, what else I can do to get this thing work. So I'm just working on another section here, and I just added another architectural element of this piece here to kind of have underneath. So instead of it being completely natural there, I thought it might be cool to echo that kind of architecture over. I'm gonna go ahead and actually compress this down and even just slightly darken it. Just so that we don't get too much information. I'm going to go ahead and lighten it too, because it is further away, and I definitely want kind of this nice atmospheric vibe to it, you know, because there's a lot of water around this area, so you can just imagine the amount of mist and just the noise, right, from all the water, like the hundreds and thousands of gallons that's pouring down per second. You know, you can just imagine like all that just completely being surrounded by water. You know, we're gonna get a lot of these nice, what I love here is the lost edges here, things that kind of like fade into the background or fade away. You know, maybe that's a little too muddy, but I'm gonna make a selection around this little rock slab here, and then make a new selection layer, and then maybe to kind of this huge waterfall right behind here, you know, just to justify kind of like that these are two separate elements and they're not butted right next to each other, but there's also a cool opportunity to put waterfalls, more waterfalls, because waterfalls are awesome. So this is going to be the theme of my image, is putting waterfalls everywhere. So we have that. Now it's like pushed back, right? Now that thing feels like it's really further back. It's probably the furthest architectural thing that's back there, like up close next to that waterfall. And even the stuff down here, I'm gonna go ahead and just kind of give it a little bit of atmosphere, you know. even though there's not much light, there's still quite a bit of mist, you know. So we're gonna give that just a nice kind of read. Push that back a little bit. And then I'm thinking maybe what else might be cool is, you know, adding just a little bit of a walkway. So this piece here, this was kind of like some sort of like, you know, Disneyland or some sort of theme park ride, you know, train thing, like train track. But I thought it might be cool to just reinforce that S-curve swoopy road. So I'm going to add this here as a way to just kind of indicate that there's, you know, this civilization, even though they're somewhat primitive, they're very advanced. You know, they still have the ability to kind of do things that are very reminiscent of like what humans would actually naturally do, is create roadways, you know, homes, all that stuff, you know, weapons, you know, areas where they'll hunt and gather. And so I'm thinking like, you know, they're going to probably have this roadway or a walkway here that they're going to be utilizing to kind of go around or safely traverse this space, right? Darken this down a little bit. It's going to get pretty dark here in the center because I really want this to have kind of more of a darker read. So that's what's great about, you know, solidifying our color mood, is that instantly when I bring in our elements here, our photo elements, whether it's a texture or an architecture, I can get that quickly embedded just by matching the color and value. That's the most important thing. A lot of times when I see, you know, other concept art, and you know, a lot of other fellow artists ask me what they can do to improve the image. You know, most times it's not even about, you know, making the painting better. It's just more about, you know, why don't you try matching the colors more or matching the values better? And you know, that's kind of one of the tricky things, because a photo has so many colors, so many values, so many different things, that it can actually completely throw your image off. And so that's one of the first things that I always try to think about is, how do we get this thing to read and still make it feel like it matches all of the other images? So here's an example. As I'm putting this top tower, this top roof shape on top of this little building or a structure here, you notice that it's relatively bright and it's orange, right? It has a really bright value. And in order for us to really get this in line or in tune with our color here, I'm actually going to first do a multiply to darken down the value, and I'm selecting the colors around it, and I'm going to use colorize to kind of get in this like bluish vein, and then just put a little bit of put on normal mode a little bit to kind of knock back a little bit of the values. And you see instantly here, just those little tweaks really got our image to be in the same kind of tone, to be in the same kind of color palette and same lighting scenario. So it looks like it's a part of the image now. It looks like it's a part of those pieces. So that's what I'm gonna do here as well. Even for this little bit of photo element here. I'm gonna go ahead and use this to kind of indicate some sort of ramp or some sort of structure leading up to this thing. And I'm using blend modes here. You can use blend modes, or you can use the magic wand tool to kind of get rid of any detail here. As you can see, there's a lot of white in this space, so I'm going to use select similar. And again, Photoshop is like one of those tools where it's one of those programs where you can do the same thing like 700 different ways, you know. And I use the match color to kind of get this in the kind of lighting scenario, and it's just really a quickie way of kind of like getting the colors to read really really in the same group. Always referring back to my sketch here, seeing how this looks. And I think this piece I don't necessarily like per se. I want to make this thing work, but I'm not too sure what I want to do with this piece. So I'm like pushing and pulling and seeing if that might be a cool gesture. But maybe this is not working at all. You know, so you can see kind of the struggles that I go through. Not everything is kind of this like, you know, we're going to get it right on the first try. You know, we try it out, you know, it sucks, pull it out. You know, if we try it out again and, you know, it doesn't work, then let's try it out somewhere else. And if it doesn't really work, then just delete it, you know, just kind of look for another solution. And that's the thing about painting. It's kind of like it's this constant like back and forth you know, struggle, this battle between like, you know, what you have planned mentally versus what you can do physically or visually. You know, it just doesn't quite want to match up, and it's like finding that perfect balance. You gotta compromise, and you gotta find a good balance. And I feel like with the painting, it's like I'm constantly arguing with my painting. You know, there's times when we get along, and when we get along, everything's all good. You know, but as a shitty analogy, it's like, you know, your painting is like you're fighting with your significant other. You know, you're like, no, you said this, you said that, and it's like, dude, can't we just all get along? And like when things are good, it's like, man, everything just flows, everything just happens to work out right. You know, your painting starts to look good. You know, but that's kind of the thing. It's like, don't ever give up. You know. Even though your painting can cause a lot of grief and, you know, headaches, it's like, you know what, let's try to work it out. Let's try to figure out a different solution to really get this thing to get going. I know it's a strange analogy. I'm full of cheesy, strange analogies, and you guys are only going to hear more and more of it. And you guys might be like, this is retarded. I don't like this. I don't want to hear any more of these cheesy analogies, John. So let me know. So here again, like I'm like looking at everything and trying to see how this is juxtaposed next to this building here. I thought maybe we can scale it up a little bit and even like push it back just a tad bit here. So I'm kind of brightening up the actual structure, just using color dodge or lighten. You know, either one of those work really. And it's one of those things where it's like I want it to be kind of in the background, but, you know, just really lightly indicated, if anything. And also I still want, you know, things to have kind of a priority of read, you know. So let's go ahead and add in this little scaffolding bit. I like this structure here. This is pretty sweet. Maybe we can stretch this out a little bit, add it here, or I don't know if I want to delete some of this stuff. Guess I delete everything. Pull this down. I guess it was just a little too convenient that it was like, hey, here's a ramp, come and join us. So maybe we can actually combine these elements here. Get this going. And then we'll maybe just darken this down just a tad bit, and then put this on lighten and just push this back. Again, same kind of formula to really get our photo bits, you know, to be implemented, or to be kind of sync with our other images, you know. I'm just gonna delete some of this stuff because I kind of wanted this more of like a jungle gym kind of structure, and I think that's what I was really going for. I didn't want this like you know, this really easy or convenient ramp just leading up to it. It just felt really not as interesting. I thought it might be cool if we had like some sort of unique way where the character can actually jump up and down and climb, walk across this like thin rope or something. And that's kind of the design vibe that I wanted for this particular piece. Um, and that's kind of the idea here. So I'm gonna just pull this more in the blue range. Maybe just pick a little bit of this and darken it down. So you can see that I'm like constantly working in other areas. Like there's things that aren't fully resolved, and I'm kind of resolving everything one step at a time. Gonna lighten this up a little bit. I don't know if it might be too much, so I'm just gonna lightly, ever so slightly. In this area here, still got to resolve that. And I think it might be cool if we added maybe just another structure here for the foreground. Maybe something that we can put here that can support this thing underneath. This might be cool. Just do something like that. Get that to kind of be kind of the understructure of how it's supporting these this little bridge here. Because again, like, you think about it, like, there are no flat roads on this rock slab, so they have to find a way to really get this thing built out properly. And also I'm going to continue this bridge here. Maybe edit some of the stuff around it, just erasing away, just to kind of refine kind of the shape. And I'm thinking like maybe this foreground here, I feel like it still needs something here, so I'm gonna just kind of play with this same old shape here. I'll put it down here maybe. This might be kind of cool. I felt like it needed kind of like a mid-ground structure, It was looking a little too empty, so maybe something like that. And that's kind of what I love about these, like, oriental fishing nets, is they have like so much interesting shapes, so many interesting forms. And maybe like a big foreground element to really to give it kind of a nice, like, we're kind of really in the thick of the the village here, and we're just like peeking through. Maybe something here. And this is something that I'm gonna just have temporarily. I'm not too sure. I'm not too 100% sure whether I want this or not. And I'm gonna just go ahead and like kind of erase out some of this extra bit, just to simplify. I'm gonna go ahead and maybe even darken this down. Pull this back just a little bit here to kind of get that nice atmospheric. Let's see here. See, this is where it's kind of like, all right, what do we do next? And so at this point, I'm kind of like, okay, well, do I really like this foreground thing? Do I want the scaffolding structures to be kind of the main theme? And this is where I'm constantly gonna go back and forth with what I have in the foreground and midground. So I'm just gonna put that on pause and just continue to build out my architecture, because again, that is kind of our main focal lead, right? Meaning it's what we're going to walk to, or it's what we're going to journey up to. So I'm going to add this little scaffolding bit just to kind of make the language a little bit more consistent here. And I'm going to just kind of dial it into our image here. Make it a little bit bigger. Delete some of the extra bits here. Maybe put it underneath, just to kind of give it a little bit more support. Because again, getting that really clean edge is architecturally would indicate that, you know, this primitive monkey tribe has like a really advanced kind of architectural sensibility, which I think we're indicating that they do, but it's still primitive, you know what I mean? So they're still going to use a lot of scaffolding and structures like that. So I'm moving this foreground thing because again, this is like, it's such a cool element, but it's like man, I feel like it now becomes about this foregroundy thing, you know? Like, do I want to move it here? But it covers all this stuff. And this is the kind of thing, it's like, you know, we have to just be mindful of how we want to stage this thing. You know, do I want it here? And you'll see me kind of like constantly moving things around just to test and see what works and what doesn't work. And a lot of times, like, you know, I'll find that like things just don't necessarily pan out the way I envision. You know, I'm kind of like, I think that like, oh, it might be cool to have this foreground element and to have all of the other stuff read, but you notice as I put this in, it starts to kind of cover quite a bit. It covers that ledge. It starts covering the structures that we indicated in the back. So there's a lot of issues that I see as we're starting to add in more pieces. So I'm just gonna put this here and just kind of continue to work on other parts when I need to. But you can see that I'm just like moving this thing around, you know. I'm just gonna erase this out a little bit to simplify. Maybe that might help it out. Maybe adding just a little bit more structure or overhang here might be cool. Maybe adding a little bit more of that repetitive scaffolding that's along the side here might help. But even then, I'm kind of like, I don't know if that's like the best thing, you know? So there's a lot of indecisiveness, you know. Again, this is kind of like that point in which I feel like I'm arguing with, you know, my significant other or my friend. I'm like, we have our disagreements. Like, no, I don't think I like this one. I like that one better. And so it's kind of like, all right, let's just pause and kind of see what else we can do. Like, because that little bit feels really contrived to me. It feels kind of cheesy that it's like pointing directly at the thing. And a lot of times we not necessarily want to have that. So let's just go ahead and, you know, use our mixer brush, and I'm going to actually go ahead and color pick this kind of structure in the back. To kind of get it in range of like maybe this kind of like cool, like warm type of structure, like warm, like, you know, rock formation that's been like calcified or like there's algae growing or something. Because, you know, like when we think of like warm rocks, we think like, oh, there's a lot of bounce light, or there's kind of like there has to be a reason for why it's warm. In this case, it does look like it's been somewhat getting like a little bit of bounce light, but there is no real light here. It's fairly like ominous looking. It's kind of has this like really kind of like colder vibe, like it's cold and everything's kind of wet and dewy. However, this is a really great justification for maybe there's green, like, you know, brown, like orange algae. So I'm actually going to play up kind of that concept and actually add in like maybe red plants or, you know, orangey kind of algae to kind of justify that, you know what, they might actually have not just plants everywhere, but maybe there's like kind of this orangey kind of um, like plant that's growing, this fungus that's growing or something. So that's kind of my justification here. So we'll just add that in. You can see as I turn on and off the multiply layer, it really blows out the background. Okay. So this foreground, what a pain in the ass, right? I don't know what to do with this thing. So it's still kind of like, it's still mentally and visually in the way, but I still need it there. You know, I'm just gonna keep it there for the time being, just to constantly remind myself, like, okay, I need to do something here. Um, and I don't know if it's like, you know, let's just continue with this mid ground piece here. I'm gonna go ahead and add just a little bit more. Maybe something here. I don't know. Maybe it's a good opportunity to kind of like refine just this edge a little bit. Oh, let's just delete that. Maybe we're going to shrink this down because I feel like it is covering quite a bit. And this is like one of those times when it's like painting can be super frustrating. All right, let's just move this thing out of the way. I'm like, ugh, I had enough with you, man. So, you know what we're going to do is we're going to just stretch, turn it the other way, just completely block everything. Now the painting's about this stick. Turn it the way maybe we can have a different you know visual opinion or something. But I definitely don't want kind of this, you know, this pointy element. So let's just get rid of this thing. Turn this over. But you know, a lot of times, like when you guys feel like you're in that stump, you're like kind of like, ah, gosh, I cannot resolve this painting whatsoever. You know what actually really helps is just walk away from your artwork. And I'm sure you guys have heard that many times before, but honestly, it's just like walk away, don't think about it. You know, go take an early lunch break. You know, go play some games or go outside, play some sports or take a jog. Come back to it with a fresh pair of eyes, because honestly, there's nothing more worse than trying to beat your painting over the head, you know, and trying to get it to work right then and there. And I know, like, for those of you who are professionals, you know, this is an issue because, you know, we're on a time crunch or we need to get things done and resolved that day. So a lot of times it's like, well, you know what? If you need to, simplify your problem and try to find another way of working it out. You know, maybe there's an alternative way of indicating or creating that same look, but without completely disrupting what we're doing. So here is where I was like, you know, I was like totally just like, you know, fuck it. I'm going to get rid of that crap, that structure, and I'm going to just hand paint, because there's something about hand painting the things is like, you know, I can gesturally feel out what it is that I want for my own image. And I think that was a problem, was that like I was starting to become a slave to my painting. I was just like I was slave to that photo reference. You know, I was like, the photo reference is like, nope, you can't put me here. Nope, you can't do this to that. And then I was like, okay, totally whipped to that actual, you know, to that texture. You know, I was like, you know what, F you, I'm gonna delete it, and I'm just gonna paint it by hand because I don't need you, man. So this is where I felt like we were able to continue on with our painting, and I'm just gonna start continuing to edit our main structure here. But I definitely feel a lot better about what we did to the left side of the painting. You know, it's still indicating a little bit of foreground. You know, it's not the coolest looking design. However, it is a simple solution to what I wanted to achieve, which is a nice little foregroundy element to kind of draw our eye in, you know. And I think it might be cool if we added just that, let's see here. It's a little bit more of that structure. Maybe there's something interesting here. I think I was playing around with the idea of like maybe we can have this bit here be more of like some sort of a rounded architectural element. You know, not that it's gonna have that that cap on the top, but maybe something here where I'm like, okay, maybe it can have kind of a cylindrical shape to the side. And again, it's all trial and error because I felt like that the side of that architecture was a little bit strange looking. I wasn't too bought on the idea of like it being completely open, but again, it's just all trial and error here. I think at one point I even thought like it might be cool if this thing was another additional extruded piece. I'm gonna match color this to kind of get in the same vein, but again, sometimes it doesn't always work out, so we're gonna have to do this manually. So we're gonna darken it down, right? We're gonna use darken. We're gonna use a little bit of normal to kind of bring down the value. And a lot of times, if the color is still warm or if it's not right, then you can use color mode to really dial it down. Put it here. Maybe some sort of like little extra piece or something down here. You know, maybe it can have like some sort of extra structure or something. Erase out what we don't need. And I was thinking like, man, it might be cool if they had like a tabletop or something. Maybe we can add this, and you know, the top of this can be lit. I don't know. Trying it out. Maybe this might be cool. You know? And as I'm doing this, you know, I'm kind of looking at it and analyzing, well, does that make my design look cooler? I don't know. I mean, it's like one of those things where it's like I'll try it out and I'll put it there, you know, just kind of look at it for a while and continue painting other aspects of our image before making a final decision. So I know for a fact that I definitely still want to bring in a little bit more texture and more information. So this is where I'm going to most likely duplicate this and maybe even get a little bit of you know, rim lighting or some sort of kind of fill light to kind of show off a little bit of the light catching the ledge of those structures. So maybe I'm just going to dial this down just a tad bit. Just get just a little bit of lighting there. I'm going to simplify this stuff here. Darken some of this stuff down just a little bit. But this piece, I don't know how I feel about this thing, man. I honestly don't. So it's gonna go bye-bye. Alright. So here's the deal. Now I have my architecture, I have my foreground, I have my midground, and I have kind of the overall lighting feel. Now we're at kind of at a pinnacle point here where I'm trying to balance out a lot of my architecture, and I'm trying to basically visually agree with what I want and what I don't want. I have a bunch of different elements here that are cool, but they're not quite jiving. They just don't want to relate to one another. Everything is kind of calling for attention in its own weird way. So this is where I'm kind of like, you know what? All right, let's just see if we can just put in a figure here and see if it makes all the difference. So I'm gonna go ahead and use this monkey photo reference to kind of get the basis of our overall readability and kind of like the world building aspect of this, to kind of give it a little bit of story, you know. Monkeys are so cool to have in a scene. It just kind of like, I totally love the movie Planet of the Apes, and it always gave me like a really like daydreamy kind of feel about like what it would be like if apes or gorillas were, you know, that intelligent to be able to create architecture, to be able to create kind of a civilization where they can actually develop things just like humans. You know, how they do things differently, because they're a lot more primitive, you know, they're animals, but it's always fun to see. So I'm definitely thinking like it might be cool if this guy was holding a spear or some sort of like weapon or something like that. I'm just gonna move this on the side just in case. I always make duplicates when I paint over an image or a texture or stuff like that, just because I never know if I'm gonna change my mind. And the last thing that I want to do is like completely or obliterate my photo reference and I don't have a copy, and I'm like, damn it, I wish I had that piece, you know. So as we put our character here, I instantly know, like, you know what, this shit is not, you know, it doesn't look right without my character. So I'm gonna put my reference here on the side, and maybe, you know, we should indicate just a little bit of that armor, to kind of get this character to read. Maybe the leg can be up. The gesture of this character was kind of like, how do I want this character to kind of sit up on this ledge? You know, he's totally a guard, you know, like if it'd be like the equivalent, it would be like the Imperial Guard of this, like, you know, Asian inspired or Japanese inspired ape village. So I think it might be cool if like the leg here was a little bit back. Maybe the leg's down forward a little bit. It's kind of like really leaning in. Let's just go ahead and darken down the character just a bit to really kind of get in line with kind of our overall scene. Because again, the ape is definitely not going to be in light. If anything, it's going to be a lot darker. Go ahead and start adding the armor. And that's what I love about like kind of using our own designs as reference, because now it's kind of like, okay, well, I know exactly what the ape is going to look like. It's going to have some sort of like medieval or Japanese inspired type of armor, to indicate, you know, the overall clothing. Maybe the armor here. Maybe just a little bit of like kind of the pouch here or something. Have a little bit of that shoulder pad read, and it doesn't have to be that detailed. It just has to be indicated, you know. It doesn't have to be as nearly as detailed as our character, because, you know, this piece isn't about the ape. It's about you know, how we have an ape-like character, but in this entire environment. This is more about the environment, if anything. Add in some of those details here, just like that. maybe just some sort of like plating or something of some sort. And you can see I'm constantly just kind of trying to refine the pose of the character. Um, and trying to see like, you know, how this overall design feels, or how the the gesture of this character feels, you know, really overlooking the city on this ledge. So added like a little bit of a helmet here. Kind of give it more of like a round-ish kind of form. It totally looks like he's wearing like a space helmet, which is awesome. Just kind of refining kind of the bit here, like kind of the back edge of this. And he totally looks like he's wearing a space helmet, right? Initially, I think it's a lot of it has to do with the shape, but also just the way it's indicated. It's still like way too clean, so I gotta add in kind of the back of the helmet. Kind of have some of these shapes come in and really describe the overall shape and design of the helmet, to kind of get it in line. Draw on the hand a bit here. Maybe holding a spear, kind of looking over. He's definitely tilted forward, you know? Definitely has that vibe of like he's on guard, but he's like really looking over the ledge. And I would assume like, you know, these apes are totally not afraid of heights, so they're just like whatever's, looking over, no big deal. Man, I would completely shit my pants, man, if I saw this. But again, these guys, they live in the heights, man, so these guys are crazy mofos. Like, they don't care. Kind of refine this pose a bit. So you saw, like, you know, we started with the photograph of the ape, you know, just for like basic color info and all that stuff, but we instantly you know, drastically painted over it quite a bit. I'm gonna grab this other ape here. It was so cool. This monkey was actually picking at like cherries or something, but I think it might be a cool image here to use for another monkey that's out in the distance, another character. Maybe he's like walking and patrolling the other section of this area. You know, they all kind of like these guards. They're standing watch, walking around. It's funny because they all kind of look like midgets here, right? Like totally, you know, everything's kind of designed for their height and size. Now, I'm like, okay, well, the character's getting a bit lost, right? Obviously, because the background and the value of the character is definitely kind of the same value, so I'm like moving it around seeing what would be a good composition. But I definitely still want the character to be, you know, relatively composed in a way that, you know, it's not obstructing or, you know, blocking the view of our architecture. So brought in another image here of another reference of another monkey, and I thought this might be more interesting because it felt like the monkey wasn't looking at the building. It felt like it was looking more down and past, and I felt like there was a slight disconnect just for me, you know. And this is where the way we pose and the way we design certain things, there's a very objective kind of point of view. And for me, I felt like I wanted our character to be more looking at the building and less at, you know, what's like on the ground. So we're actually going to completely replace this ape character, and we're going to redesign. We're going to design another character looking at the distance. So I'm going to use this as my starting base. Duplicate it over and do another version. Why? Because that's what we do, man. Just don't be afraid of messing up and just doing another one. I know having to redo paintings or drawings is a pain in the ass. It's an utter pain in the ass. However, there's something to be said about, like, you know, really taking the opportunity to try things out and just, you know, without feeling like, you know, there's any consequence. Like, you know, since it is your own artwork, or, you know, it's your own image that you're making, you know, why not try it out? It doesn't hurt, you know. It's only going to make your artwork better. So I think one of the worst things that I've ever had to change was when I had to do like a crowd piece, and there's like 100 characters in that image, and the art director that I was working for wanted me to actually change all the pose of the characters, and that was soul crushing, man. Like I literally wanted to like throw my Wacom tablet pen at him. Like at moments like that, I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm gonna freaking kill you, dude. But only because it's like that's super time consuming, you know. It's not like we're changing a small design. It's like, no, you want me to change an entire scene. That's insane. That is just insanity, you know. All right, so painting in the character, and I'm just gonna try to really get the character to kind of fit in the same value range, and also to really get it in more in line with the kind of lighting scenario. So you can see that I'm darkening the character down, just so that we kind of have the nice like shadowy tones in the actual ape character. And more or less, it's gonna look kind of like a silhouette. But this is a great way to kind of start thinking about or implementing the overall tones, you know, especially before we get into kind of the armor bit. So let's see if this looks good. All right, cool. And then I'm gonna just hide this. See what we can do. We can just pose this guy down just a little bit. I definitely like kind of this size here. And maybe I can just kind of adjust the arms a little bit. It felt a little too stiff, kind of pulling out. I think it might be cool if I actually got the arm to bend out just a little bit here, so it's not just completely like a straight kind of anatomy where it's just like pulling out, but it has a little bit more of a relaxed kind of pose or something like that. And what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to kind of cool down this image. So when I color pick, cool down and darken, when I color pick this image, it's going to be relatively in the same vein. So when I do the helmet, here, or even the shoulder pads, it's still kind of like, you know, this would be what the local value of this would be, you know, in shadow. So that way I don't have to second guess or like really try to aim to rework the lighting scenario once I've painted it really brightly. So this is kind of a way to, you know, do that simultaneously. So now I'm just going to sketch in kind of the overall design and feel of this. And then get in a little bit of the indication of the helmet here. I think it might be cool to have kind of the the helmet to be round. Because I definitely don't want to get too complex. And maybe the ape is actually looking off into the distance here. And as I'm actually refining the design a bit, I'm definitely thinking about, okay, what are other ways that we can actually pop out our character, right? Because right now, if you look at our design, or if you look at our painting overall, it's kind of like we have a dark character in front of a dark building. So eventually, I'm gonna have to lighten the background, right? So these are some of the things that I want to keep in mind, even though I'm painting in a dark figure. You know, we have to think about ways of like, okay, how are we gonna really brighten up the environment in order for it to really make sense, in order for it to really kind of have that dark against light. Because right now our character is dark, the background is dark, so everything's kind of really hard to see. It's kind of all blending in together, right? So I'm adding a little bit of like rim lighting here to kind of pop out our character just a little bit, and then just adding in some details, you know, things that, you know, if you really pay attention, you might be able to kind of get a glimpse of. But this is just more for me, if anything. Someone who's going to look at this image is probably not going to catch that right away. But, you know, these are some things that I really want to solidify in the design. And even getting in these little hatch marks, right? I definitely want to kind of sell that whole like concept of, you know, he's still wearing kind of this medieval type of texture. And I'm going to get in a little bit of this kind of cool lighting, you know, to kind of really fill in so we can see the forms wrap around here, just like that. And maybe some of the ties in the back. And now it's kind of like, okay, well, we got the design of the character, and we got kind of some of the designs, some of the materials to read. You know, whether it's like cloth or some sort of armor bit. I got the hand here holding on to some sort of like weapon of some sort, which I'm definitely going to add in right about here. But I definitely want to really kind of get the overall read of our character, even if it's like tiny rim lighting, to kind of get some of the edge to pop out. And that's certainly helping, right? Now let's add in the spear. I'm just using like 100% hard brush here, and it, you know, it's just kind of like making a stick to start off. And I'm just gonna add a little bit more of a rim light to kind of catch that lighting scenario. Because even though it's dark, you know, we can safely assume that, you know, it's gonna catch just a little bit of light, you know, kind of the backside of the actual armor here. I always love kind of like painting in and drawing on top, because it's always a nice combination of showing off detail. Getting a little bit of that like slight reflective light on the helmet as well. just start to like refine the character just a little bit. And I'm not gonna beat it to death where I'm gonna refine everything, just in areas where it interests me, which is like the helmet, the shoulder pads. You know, those would be kind of like the micro focal points of our character. Maybe just some like a little bit of hatch detail and kind of pull back and see, you know, how the character's reading, you know, without any atmosphere, without anything kind of separating the building and the character. So what I'm going to start to do is I'm going to start consolidating the building structure just to simplify it. And you'll notice that I'm like highlighting and compressing everything down. I like to do this only because it makes the workflow a lot simpler. That way I don't have to like juggle like 24,000 different layers. Now for those of you who are working professionally, you know, that is something that you do have to consider is if you compress something, just always make sure you have a backup file of the actual original layer so that if the client asks for a revision, you're able to do that effectively and quickly. Otherwise, it's going to be a complete pain in the butt. You know, you definitely don't want to have to repaint everything, because that will just totally just kill you. It would just be a complete like, yeah, it'll be a complete like soul crusher, you know. All right, we got this piece here. I'm gonna go ahead and just kind of darken some of this stuff down because it is looking a little bright in my opinion. Maybe add some windows, but I'm also still keeping in mind the distance between our character and the building. Again, it's almost incredibly hard to read, so I definitely don't want to forget that. Just adding in some like little holes or something where we can see some indication of like windows, or where, you know, we can have characters kind of look out. A bit of an opening. All right, I'm just gonna dial down just a little bit using our lighten brush, just kind of knock down the black values, because again, at that distance I don't want things to be that dark, because it's gonna compete against our foreground elements. All right. Now about here, it's a really good time to start just thinking about the overall readability. So you'll see me compress these elements down again. I'm just going to copy merge this so you guys can kind of see what I'm compressing. And copy this down, put that in the folder, so you guys can see like how I managed to what do you call it? Basically have the elements here built up. And now I'm gonna create a brush, or a layer I mean, and I'm just gonna go ahead and like kind of push some of this back here. On this layer using a lighten brush. And I'll create another layer on top. And just as a quick test, I'm just going to go ahead and knock some of these values down just a little bit, because it is looking just a little too bright, or too dark I mean. So it's like I want to brighten it up and just kind of group the values a bit, because it's calling for so much attention there that I almost want to just simplify the read. Now as I'm pushing this back, notice how we're getting a little bit more distinction between the character and the building, right? So this is where I can tell myself like, okay, now that I have some sort of distinction here, it might be cool. It might be a really good opportunity to add some more elements like waterfalls or something here. So I'm gonna select just this bit here. It's a pretty cool element, and I think it might be awesome to add like a waterfall or something like right here on this ledge, like coming off of this ledge right here. For the longest time, I was thinking like, okay, I have this strong ledge here, but it's not visually doing anything but creating a nice, a little compositional shape. But I'm gonna go ahead and add a waterfall right here. So I'm gonna lighten up. I put on lighten so that I can actually get the effect and only the light values and not the dark values. I'm gonna erase what I don't need. And I'm gonna go ahead and actually just kind of refine and feather the edges a little bit. And I'm gonna go ahead and actually multiply and darken down the value of the waterfall, because it's too bright and it's not in light. So the value is actually gonna be a lot cooler, And I'm almost thinking it might be cool to have like just a little bit of shadow, maybe a little bit of light kind of coming in from the top, just bleeding in, just really ever so slightly. And then I'm gonna have kind of this mist, this a large amount of smoke, all this like water coming through, and this is where I'm gonna have that nice separation between the building and our character. Right now we kind of got this like really dramatic kind of like effect of like this waterfall coming in and creating an awesome separation between our building and our character. Just gonna add just a little bit of indication of rocks or something in the distance. Maybe we'll just kind of feather the edges a little bit. It's a little too strong in my opinion, so I'm gonna kind of knock those back a little bit. I'm gonna edit down some of these shapes here, these little sticks. I don't think we necessarily need those things. If anything, I'm just gonna clean this up a little bit so it can be relatively clean, and then I can add in anything that I need to on top. I think this arm for me was a little bit too long, so I'm just gonna edit it up and erase out this bit here. It just felt like a little too elongated. I know apes generally have really elongated arms and limbs and stuff, but it just felt a little too long. Just kind of want more of a relaxed hand or pose or something. Maybe a tail, but I don't know. I don't know if that might be too much, but give a little bit more of a defined silhouette of the feet here. And now we can really see the difference between the ape and the building, right? It's looking relatively a lot more clear. I'm gonna brighten up the character just a little bit and cool it down, because what I want is the ape is actually in shadow, but it's like too silhouetted. So this is an opportunity for me to really bump up some of the fill light. Fill light meaning like some of the light that's coming from the sky, or even like that's bouncing off of the values or the light from the waterfall, and it gives us just a hint of light just on our character, just ever so slightly. But I don't want to blow it out too much to the point where it's going to compete against our background. I just want just enough, right? I'm just going to alter this shape here, kind of get it more in front of our waterfall, and even maybe eliminating some of these shapes, and also probably erasing out, like doing a soft eraser, and blending it into the waterfall, because again it's like butted up right up against it. This can be some sort of contraption where this is how they generate energy, or this is how they catch food or something. Maybe this is a filtration device, but it's still kind of presented in a way that it's some sort of like primitive object, a primitive thing. that's been kind of retrofitted for some sort of purpose, right? And then from here, I'm gonna just add in the little slats coming out. Definitely want just nice clear overlaps. Want to make sure that it doesn't like create a weird shape, so I'm just gonna modify some of the length of these sticks, and also just add a little bit of a top light to these. Since it's receiving light, a little bit of fill light. Kind of cut these off so they're kind of like stumps. Okay. I'm gonna go ahead and compress this so it's all one layer. I'm just gonna add a little bit more here, just a little bit more thickness, and I'm gonna be really loose about it. Like, look how loose I'm going with the brush. Add just a little bit of like top light to some of these. Add just a little bit more of the bluer value. It probably wouldn't be warm. You know, it's definitely going to be more in the cooler tones. And since this is like in our foreground, or it's closer to us, and it's not as detailed, I'm just going to use a big broad brush to just indicate some sort of like light that's hitting this side. Even though it, I want it to be relatively darker, but I kind of want, more of a simple gesture. Okay, I'm gonna continue adding some of these other parts here. Now when we look at this, I'm like, all right, cool. It's starting to feel fairly somewhat comprehensive. Add just a little bit of light there, and also I'm gonna just fade out some of this stuff. So I'm gonna erase away just a little bit of this, like there's water kind of seeping past it. Okay, kind of look at everything from a distance. And I'm really liking kind of the way it's turning out. Like the lighting it's still in the realm of what we initially created. It has kind of the nice graphic read that I was going for. Now it's just kind of like I just need to simplify some of these backgrounds just a little bit, because it's reading very harsh. So I'm going to use the mixer tool, and I'm going to sample all layers, and I'm actually going to sample, and just be careful because the mixer brush does tend to lag just a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and actually just do this more manually, where I'm going to get a texture brush and just go on normal mode and just kind of break that up just a little bit, because that's all I really need. I just need like not necessarily a soft brush, but I wanted something a little bit more textural to kind of give it a little bit more tooth and some visual randomness. Use this to kind of soften up the edge there. And when I say edge, it just basically means like detail or a sharp silhouette. So I'm just color picking from the photo that we used to kind of break this up just a little bit, to simplify, you know? Because otherwise it's going to be, everything's going to be way too overly descriptive, and I don't want our image to compete in that way. I'm going to just paint in some of my own little waterfall shapes. Just going to soften this edge just a little bit. Because again, that part is in shadow, so it's going to use a soft brush to kind of like knock that down just a tad bit here. So that light is coming at an angle. Or it's just hitting just that little pocket of area. Gonna knock this back just a little bit. Just enough. That way we're still indicating that there's architecture, but it's not completely being spelled out. Okay, so we got this element here, and this is where we can actually strategically lighten up the areas around the head of the character, right? So I'm gonna go ahead and actually that was just kind of a quick test, but I think it might be an opportunity to kind of like dial down some of this stuff just a little bit, just show pockets of the actual architecture. Gonna adjust the feet just a little bit here. I guess I wasn't too keen on the pose. It just felt stiff. Something about it was like, you know, the character was just kind of standing really straight, and I felt like everything was straight. Like the arm is the stick is straight, the arm is straight, the legs I kind of wanted to be a little bit more dynamic. So just kind of like reposed it just a little bit. I think another great part about this is I'm actually going to think about ways to bring a little bit more color, because everything is getting relatively blue. So I definitely want this warm value, this warm kind of tone. So I'm going to use the mixer brush, and I'm going to put it on a mode. I guess it's on wet, and I'm just testing this stuff out because it's like relatively new to me as well. I kind of don't know what these tools do exactly. So it's like a good time for me to experiment and kind of try something that I don't know and go back to what I do know, and just kind of go back and forth just a little bit here. Just use a little bit of a texture brush to kind of indicate a little bit more, maybe some of this fungus, this red fungus or red plant growth. Kind of growing in patches here, and I like the juxtaposition of this orange. It kind of has a nice feel. So there's other character here, but we can archive that. So I'm thinking another element we can bring in is just a little bit more waterfall texture. And I'm just trying this out, seeing if we need a little bit more information here, because it did get a little bit simple. And I thought it might be a nice opportunity to kind of show off just a little bit more of kind of this like waterfall type of texture here. I'm just going to go ahead and just colorize, desaturate just a little bit, bring it more into the cool tone, just kind of add in something here. Maybe we could put it on screen. Screen tends to work a little bit better at times when you're trying to get a lighter value. Um, Lighten tends to work in the instance where if you have a lot of um, if you have a lot of dark around, lighten works really well. But if you have a lot of light, lighten tends to kind of calculate the amount of dark versus the amount of light, and it only works. It only sometimes works if the instance, or in that scenario, it makes sense for the light to go on top of dark. I know it sounds really confusing. You guys are probably wondering, like, what the hell does that mean? Basically, screen will basically lighten whatever it can, even on top of a fairly brighter value. However, lighten will only lighten areas or only show through areas if it's only darker. So that's kind of like the way I understand it. So I'm using screen for this, and I definitely want kind of this trickle of like waterfall or something to kind of show through a little bit. I'm gonna brighten this up. Just desaturate just a little bit here. And I think it might be cool just to indicate just kind of the waterfall seeping through these structures. You know, it's like it's a lot of these finishing touches, and you know, a lot of paintings that I see, whether it's mine or my friends, or even paintings that I've come across, you know, from students and other fellow artists, when they ask me, like, you know, what they can do to really finish up a painting, it's like once you have your general gestures in, like your general composition, your color, your lighting, the finishing touches is basically this. This is kind of the icing on top, right? It's kind of like, what do we do to really make this look appealing? You know, like all the little tiny things, whether it's like architecture, refining the edge a little bit, you know, putting extra bit of attention to details, making sure that, you know, it has some sort of nice kind of transitions from like light to dark, or architecture, whatever it is. You know, it's like really polishing and finishing up that edge. Even things like this, where I'm actually taking the top of this piece, so I felt like it was relatively simple up there. You know, it was really flat, even though it did obey my sketch, but I just felt like in terms of architecturally and design wise, it was kind of boring. You know, so I'm gonna go ahead and add this piece here, and it's very true to that original architecture. And I'm gonna go ahead and dial this down in lighting. Just gonna use a soft brush, you know, knock it down, and just kind of push it back, and you can see instantly it's kind of integrated, right? But it's even stuff like that that really helps with just refining our design, refining our image. Let's see what else. What else can we do here? Maybe this waterfall is a little bright, so I'm gonna knock this down just a bit. The reason why I thought it was bright, because my eye kept on getting stuck up there, so I definitely want the highest point of contrast or interest around my focal point. I definitely don't want the amount of contrast to be where the waterfall is, so I'm gonna really push it way back here where our character and architecture is. So I'm gonna add just a little bit of color dodge and just kind of slightly change the saturation, desaturate just a little bit, and darken the value just a tad bit. And I'm gonna also kind of knock back the opacity, so we kind of have like this nice like bit of glowy light seeping through. I'm gonna change this up just a little bit here, so it's not as green. For some reason, like, color dodge is always a strange thing to me. It acts in such weird ways. You know, it's like the most amazing tool, but it like, it's hard to comprehend how it calculates color. So I'm just gonna add just a little bit more light here, seeping through. Okay, so I'm gonna add a little bit more of this fungi way back here in the distance, you know, and obviously I'm not gonna add an entire forest of this stuff, but I definitely want just a little bit more pop of color. I think it might be cool to just have that. And I'm doing it within the same value range, meaning I want it to be, I want it to feel like it's way back there, like in the midst of the fog, all the waterfall dew and all that stuff. So I kind of want a little bit of that yellow just to seep through just a bit. Add just a little bit more here on that pathway, kind of on this ledge, just a little bit. I was thinking maybe here as well, and I'm gonna brighten up that little ledge right there, so we kind of get this nice little bit of yellow, a hint of yellow, or a hint of this like fungi kind of color that's like growing on the ledge. And even though it's like it's fungi, you know, it's kind of like, well, it might be some sort of like really beautiful looking contrasty plant, you know, because they're way up in these waterfall canyons, and you know there's kind of this like really strange looking organic thing that's growing around their, you know, their architecture or their civilization. You know, in like I think in Japan there's like kind of like these trees that basically blossom pink and white, and they're kind of so, it looks so like beautiful, and just the way it's contrasting with the architecture and the landscape, it has such a nice feel. And that's kind of like what I'm trying to achieve here. Instead of the cliche like, oh, let's just have green plants here, what if it had orange? What if it had like these strange colors to contrast our image? Okay, going back to this little foreground thing. It's such a pain in the ass, man. Like I've been battling with this little bit here for such a long time, you know, and as you guys are watching this demo, this is real time, but I just do not know what to do with this piece. I know I like it, I just don't know how I can use it. So maybe instead of trying to fit it in here, maybe I can just use parts of it. Maybe it can be on the corner here. I'm just gonna go ahead and darken this down, see how it looks. And it's not really doing too much for us. It's kind of like, okay, or there's a structure on the side. And maybe I can pull it towards the side here. And this is where it's starting to work for us a little bit here, because I like the fact that it actually it jets out and it's creating like these really interesting forms. And I think that's what I liked about this particular texture the most. I just was trying to figure out, like, you know, how the hell can we use this thing? This is such a cool piece, but it's like, damn it, everywhere I put it, it just sucks, right? It's just not wanting to, you know, jive with my overall composition here. So I'm thinking like it might be cool to add this here. All right, so adding in these these extra little structures and stuff kind of gives us like a lot of nice small shapes, and I think that's kind of what I really needed here. And it's starting to kind of fulfill a nice visual aid for creating complexity, and also just a little bit of kind of this language of, like, you know, it's chaotically put together but in an organized way for these like scaffolding bits. Erase some of this away. Maybe add just a little bit more. Again, keeping in mind, you know, this is a real-time live sketch that I did in about 2 hours, and it uses a lot of heavy photo bits here. And I definitely wanted the the emphasis to be more about mood, and utilizing a relatively quick technique here. And so typically, if I were to do this, professionally, and to do it to higher degree, I would actually start it off this way. Um, However, the finish quality would be a lot more, I would spend a lot more time. But this is kind of the extent of what I would do, and how I would start my painting process. I think it might be cool to add just a little bit of like these characters in the back, just kind of indicated in the distance. Maybe just some extra like other guards or something. Back here or something here. This might be really cool. They're just kind of like hanging out. But I kind of wanted this like strange, desolate kind of feel. Like it's not like the most lively, most interactive kind of city or village. It's kind of this weird, like everyone's just kind of there, like watching guard. Maybe they see, or they're waiting for an invasion or something. Maybe there's like a monkey here on top as well. Add a little bit of highlight. All right. Sweet. Okay, cool. I'm going to compress all this stuff here. Simplify that. And we have our little elements here, so just keep it clean. I'm going to go ahead and compress this down to a layer. And let's just go ahead and just kind of soften up and break some of these edges here. And I'm using a smudge brush to do that, because I don't want the photo quality to be too overbearing, or for it to be too over, I guess, overly stated. So I'm just gonna use just a little bit of smudge here to kind of help break some of the edging, so it kind of like the photo element kind of peeks in and out. And this here, I kind of want to fade it just a little bit, because it's a bit of a strong line here. And I'm just gonna let it I just kind of want to let it like kind of fade out like this. Kind of break that edge just a little bit. So water doesn't always necessarily fall straight down. It's gonna get influenced by air and all this stuff. So that's something that I definitely want to keep in mind. And create another layer here, and I'm just gonna make a nice like bluish shadow. Put this on like multiply, or even like soft light works as well. And just to kind of emphasize a little bit of shadow there, that's kind of an underhanging here, so that we have kind of a pocket of shadow and also a little bit of light. Because again, everything's relatively kind of dark, but then I definitely want areas that are a little bit more ambiently darker. To kind of fade it out just a little bit. Okay, and add just a little bit more light in here, just to kind of knock that back a bit. Gonna color pick a little bit of the colors from the our waterfall here. I'm gonna make a selection and basically invert it so that I don't affect the actual architecture. And I'm just gonna go ahead and just knock some of this stuff back just a tad bit, especially the structures, some of the structural details here. I'm going to use a pattern stamp tool. If you guys haven't used this before, basically it's the tool underneath your clone brush, and it basically gives you a nice effect for kind of this, you know, if we were to import, let's say, a texture here, we're able to kind of get a nice kind of patterny kind of like effect or look. But in this case, I'm actually going to go ahead and import just an abstract painting that I got off the internet. I've just kind of collected on my own, and I definitely want to just kind of indicate just a little hint of it, just to kind of have it show through. It's just the way you would use photo textures. You know, I definitely want to kind of alter it and just use just a hint of some of the textures that seep through, just to give it a little bit more variety of color. So I'm going to add it here in this pocket of area, this pocket of dark here, and just maybe underneath this area here as well. Kind of erase out, edit out some of the stuff where we don't necessarily need it. I'm going to darken it down just a little bit, so I don't want it to be too bright. However, I do want that texture. And I'm going to use this texture here in the back as well. Just maybe in the waterfall or down here on the bottom. Maybe go ahead and just kind of desaturate that down. Change it to more of a blue tone and put on soft light. Just to kind of get these little cool happy accidents. These little brush strokes. Gonna put a mask on here and just edit it down and apply it. See how it looks, you know? Oh, just keep in mind the mask has to be completely black. Otherwise, you're gonna get little bits of it kind of cropping in to other areas of the image. I'm just gonna kind of dial it down a little bit and then desaturate, because I don't want it to be super blue down there. I just kind of want this like weird texture to kind of seep through. I love these weird abstract brushstrokes. You know, it's, for me, it's always been really hard to capture that. So I always want to, you know, use, whether it's like my own painting, traditional media, or some sort of abstract image, to kind of capture that like feel, you know. And we're gonna use overlay here to kind of get that nice like wispy texture. Overlay or soft light. Oh, from what I know, soft light is kind of like the less toned down version of overlay. You know, overlay tends to like really crunch it a little bit more, but that's basically it. Yeah, I really hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial. And let me know if you guys have any questions, and I'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching.